yeah. Oh, yeah, Lord. You reign.
Yeah.
My Prince of Peace, Lord. I worship you. Who you are. Did anybody come to worship him today? Who you are. You're my provider. You reign in victory. You're my prince. Because because of who you are. My provider. Hallelujah. You rule. You're my prince. Because of who you are, yeah. You are so marvelous to me, yeah. I worship you. You are so faithful. You are so gracious. I worship you. If you don't do anything else, I worship you because of who you are. Who you are, yes. Oh, yeah. Come on, let's give God some praise in this house. He is so worthy. I said he is so worthy. I pray that you can look over your life and see that no matter what circumstance you find yourself in, God has been good to you. God is being good to you. And the best is yet to come, just because that's how God is. And when you think about how God is, that's enough to worship him. And so I can worship God because God is going to be God. No matter what happens down here, no matter who sits in what seat, no matter what happens to our health, God is going to be God. And that is worthy of our praise and our worship. Somebody ought to say amen. Our preaching material is found in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 8, verses 27 through 35. Judges 8, verses 27 through 35. The text says, Gideon made the gold into an ephod An ephod is essentially a fancy clergy robe, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it, the ephod, there, and it became, notice it became, it didn't start off, but it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Verse 28 is a new paragraph. It says, thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise his head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace 40 years. Verse 29 says, Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went back home to live. He had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abizurite. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They went up, they set up Baal-Arath as their god, and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. The 35th verse says, they also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in spite of all the good things he had done for them. As you take your seats, I want to finish our thoughts on this series, Finishing Your Journey. The subtitle for today is Snares and Aftermath. You should see this on the insert in your bulletin. I trust we still remember that we are finishing our journeys, ready or not, want it or not. This thing is coming to an end. And I don't know about you, but I want to finish my journey strong. Anybody want to finish strong? This series gives us some principles for finishing our journey strong. This is the last chapter of Gideon's journey, his ministry, his life. We started off talking about godly diplomacy. We've talked about godly grit. Last week, we were talking about godly victories and assignments. Somebody should remember that God will destroy the wicked, which means you ought to make sure you're on God's side and not on the wicked side. We talked about being prudent with accepting invitation. Every invitation don't deserve a yes. You ought to know and carry out your God-given assignment. If you missed any of that, talk to the media about the CDs and DVDs. There's another sermon in here. Today, I want us to focus on Gideon's ephod. And I want you to look at what was the aftermath, what happened after he died. And to organize our thinking, I want to talk about how we should be mindful of snares and the aftermaths of our lives. Can I talk about snares for a moment? In verse 27, it talks about how Gideon took the gold and made an ephod. You do recall that the battle has been fought. The victory has been won. The people asked Gideon to rule over them. He said no. They asked Gideon's son to rule over him. Gideon said, no, my son will not rule over you. Now, if you just want to do something for me, give me a gold earring. So all these people gave him gold earrings, gold trinkets. And what did he do with some of this gold? He fashioned it into an ephod. An ephod, the best thing for us to see, what would that be like today? It would be a very fancy clergy robe. Now, we can speculate, why would Gideon build an ephod? I don't think, I wouldn't bet the rent money on it, but I don't think he built the ephod so it could be an idol. Some have argued that he built it so that there would be some symbolism of God's presence. Ophrah is quite a ways from Jerusalem. There is a lack of central religion among the Hebrews at this time, and perhaps, this is very speculative, perhaps he built the ephod with good intentions. Regardless of what his intentions were, the ephod became, notice it did not start off as, but it became a snare. It became an object of sin. And it was not only a problem for Gideon and for his family, but the text says all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it, that is the ephod there, and it became a snare. There's a couple of things I want to put on your mind in this neighborhood of snare. The first one is I want to tell you that your intentions and impact will be judged. Which I'll repeat after me, your intentions and impact will be judged. God is an inspector of both our intentions and impact. That is, God sees our hearts, our motives, why we do what we do, and then he actually sees what we do. Let's see, can we find this in the Bible? 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, 1 Samuel 16, 7 says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at." Listen, people look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. In other words, you can do the right thing outwardly, but God knows your heart. And how many of you all know only what you do for Christ will last? But God does not only see our heart, he also sees our fruit. Matthew 7, verse 20 says, "Thus by their fruit you will recognize them." Do you hear me when I tell you that God will judge what is in our hearts, what our intentions are, and God will judge our fruit. What do we do with what we say is in our heart? If you got that point, we're ready to move on to the next and say that we ought to strive for godly intentions and impact. Because God can see what's in our heart, you and I ought to be asking the Lord, help me get my heart right. Since God knows what's on my mind, Lord, I want you to clean my mind. I want you to clean my heart. I want you to take out anything that's not of you. I want you to fill me with those things that put a smile on your face. Your prayer and my prayer ought to be, Lord, help me renew my mind and set my mind on things above. I want to think the way you want me to think. I want to feel the way you want me to feel so I can live the way you want me to live. That ought to be your prayer and mine. Don't want to get to the end of the journey and discover you've done some good things, but you've done them for the wrong reason. And you know that's possible. You can do good stuff for the wrong reason. You can sing good for the wrong reason. You can preach well for the wrong reason. You can give good money. You can perform acts of service for the wrong reason. Your prayer and mine ought to be, Lord, I want my heart and mind lined up with your will for my life. And while I'm in this neighborhood, let me say a word about how the affirming of our blackness ought to grow out of our understanding of God and not out of our bitterness. As I was preparing this sermon and thinking about the legacy I want to leave here, I would like to hope somebody heard me preach about black stuff. You ever heard me preach about black stuff? You ever hear me preach about black issues? Yeah. I want to make sure you understand, where does that come from? There's a passage in Psalms 139, verse 14, Psalms 139, verse 14, that talks about how we are fearfully and wonderfully made. I take that to mean that God has made each one of us uniquely. God did not design all of us to be the same, and therefore if you don't look like others, you ought to try to imitate others. No, no. When I read the Bible, I believe God has made all of us the way he wanted us to be, and the best thing for us to do is celebrate who God has made us. I think God has made lions, tigers, and bears. The lion ought not try to act like a tiger. The tiger ought not try to act like a bear. The bear ought not try to act like a tiger. God made tigers, lions, and bears. Are y'all with me here? I do not think that the lion is better than the tiger. I don't think the tiger is better than the bear, but I do think the lion, tiger, and bear are three separate species. Can I get some help up in here? I like fish. I like fish. I like tilapia fish. In fact, I love tilapia fish. I like catfish, but I love tilapia fish. I like whiting fish, but I love tilapia fish. Haddock is okay if you put enough hot sauce on it, but I like tilapia fish. I used to like orange roughy until I knew how much it cost. Then I went back down to tilapia fish. All of these are fish, but how many of y'all know they are different types of fish? I would like to hope, and you know, when I was preparing this part of the sermon, I had people like Eric Kia and others in mind. What would they say Baines thought about race issues? I would hope that they remembered, that they understood that Baines thought that God has made some black and some white. I would be disappointed if they thought that Baines was anti-white, that somehow my affirmation of blackness was some way degrading and negating the importance of white. Have you ever been to a heart doctor? Some of you, do you at least know about heart doctors? There are some doctors who specialize in the heart. If you got a foot problem, you wouldn't go to a heart doctor. The heart doctor would say, it seems to me that you might be more comfortable and be better served going to a foot doctor. Now, if something is wrong with your feet, you wouldn't want to go to the heart doctor, you go to the foot doctor. If something is wrong with your heart, you don't go to the foot doctor, you go to the heart doctor. Do you know that doctors oftentimes have their specialty? So there's some information that all of the doctors know, but many doctors have a specialty. Well, Baines, why do you specialize in so many black issues? It's because the people I preach to on Sunday are predominantly black. And one of the reasons I preach about so many black issues, because some of y'all need to be reminded that you're black. Because you think that because you done finally got your education, you done retired, you got your stuff, that somehow you're something other than us. But every now and then we need to be reminded, no matter how much money you got, how much education you got, no matter what job you have or had, you are still fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm trying to bet my best to get you to see God didn't run out of white paint and left you brown. God made you brown. He didn't mess up your hair. You don't have bad hair. You got black hair. You know, there are some, and I shared this morning, and I was trying to be half joking because y'all get a little tense when I talk about race stuff. But there are some who look good with thin lips and thin nose and thin hair that just blow in the wind. Some people can do that. But then there are others, they need a little meat on the bone. and they need a little thickness in the hair. Their lips need to be a little bit bigger because they kiss better. Their nostrils need to be, well. I think I'm getting too descriptive. I think you got the point here. I think you got the point here. It takes all kinds to make up this world. And I would hate for any, but especially my young people, to get caught up in all of this black rage and bitterness. Babies, listen. Being black and angry is not going to help you do much or nothing in America. You got to appreciate who you are. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are. And let me just throw this in for free. You will never be like others. The best you can be is who God made you to be. That's like buying a great piece of art. It is a masterpiece. It is unique. It's one of a kind. And then you and your crazy self go get some paint and try to make the masterpiece look like something else you done seen. Can't you see if God made you a masterpiece, you ought to celebrate the fact I am a masterpiece. Celebrate the fact that God made me like this. Be thankful for who God made you to be, because at the end of the day, you can't be nobody but you. But it's all about what God has done and is doing. Now, if I had more Hispanic members, then I got to put some Hispanic stuff in my preaching. If I had more white members, I would have to put some more white stuff in my preaching. If I had some Irish folk here, I would have to get me a green robe, because today is St. Patrick's Day. That the preaching that I'm trying to put in your mind is that God has made each of us as we are. It does not grow out of black rage. Why does pastor preach about black stuff? It's not black rage. It is out of my understanding that God has made each of us fearfully and wonderfully. Somebody ought to say amen right there. But you know, you can get all this philosophical stuff right. You can talk the talk and got it all right in your head and in your mind. But if you don't have some fruit, you got a problem with the Lord. There is this idea that you can have a whole lot of leaves on your tree, but if there's no figs on your tree, you're going to have a problem with the Lord. When you and I look at our lives, would God be pleased with how we are taking care of ourselves? Would God be pleased with what we are contributing to our family, to our church, to our community? I'm doing the best I can to get you to see you got to watch the snares in your life. You don't want to be guilty of doing the right thing for the wrong reason, because then it can become a snare. And then you don't want to be guilty of having great thoughts, but you don't do anything. It can become a snare, a sin of omission, failing to do the right thing. I hope you got that. It's time to move on. I got to say something about aftermath. Somebody say aftermath. Listen, in verses 28 through 35, the Hebrews had 40 years of peace after Gideon took care of the Midianites. Praise the Lord. On a personal level, when you look at Gideon, what was his latter years like, and what was his afterlife, his legacy? Well, in his latter years, he fathered 70 sons. 70, I'm saying 50 plus 20, 70 sons, because he had many wives. He had a whole lot of wives, and he had enough energy to have a concubine. Now, a concubine, we know about side pieces, but this is a side piece is 2 steps lower than a concubine. So you got wife, concubine, and side piece. The Hebrew economy had some laws and some regulations for the concubine's status. It was less than wife, but she wasn't just a side piece. She wasn't a woman of the night. She had some status. Now, where did he get all of the energy for all of these women and children? I'm not sure. I want to stay over here on something we could talk about softly. I'm trying to keep moving through here. He had all of these children, and then he died at a good old age. And then he was buried in his daddy's tomb. And then, perhaps to his disappointment, after all of his service and after 40 years of peace, the record showed that the people he served so well went right back into prostituting themselves, worshiping Baal. They forgot about God. They forgot about Gideon's family. This is the aftermath of Gideon's ministry and life. What a nice little story. Here's the preaching question. What would be the aftermath of your ministry? The aftermath of your life? When it's time for your soul to be in eternity and your body is rotting back, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, what will be the after story? What will people say after you are gone? May I make two big suggestions? The first one is, do the best that you can. Somebody say, do the best you can. One of the things I love about Gideon, one of his positives is that he took 300 men and he absolutely annihilated the Midianites. He took what he had and did the best that he could do. And I'm asking you right here and right now, what are you doing? Are you taking the best that you have and doing the best that you can with it? Or are you complaining about who's not with you? Are you complaining about what woulda, coulda, shoulda happened if everything was lined up in your life? Can I give you a scripture that brings this into focus for us? In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11 through 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11 through 15. This text is talking about judgment seat of Christ. Somebody say judgment seat of Christ. That's what we're talking about. This is a different judgment than the great white throne judgment. In the book of Revelation, there is the great white throne judgment. The books will be open, and the book of life will be open. That is not what we're talking about right now. These are two different situations. The great white throne judgment is for everybody. We're going to do all right there because Jesus has put our name in the Lamb's book of life. Y'all missed your shout. I said Jesus has put our name in the Lamb's book of life. We're going to be all right at the great white throne judgment. I'm not concerned about that. But what I am concerned about is the judgment seat of Christ. This 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11 through 15 stuff almost haunts me when I prepare to preach and teach, and as I try to live my own life in line with what I preach and teach. 1 Corinthians 3 is always hovering around my mind. Listen, would you please? It says, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. Somebody say Jesus is the foundation. Verse 12, if anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stone, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. Repeat after me, the fire will test the quality of each person's work. You got it. Verse 14 says, if what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. catch verse 15. Start back in verse 14. It says, if what has been built